So Claire, I want us to talk a little bit about this aspect of the unique self-emergence process where it enables people that are working with clients, whether they're therapists or coaches or even, kind of healers of other kinds, where they can actually bring in this spiritual dimension to their work, that there's like a yearning for people to bring in that spiritual dimension. And kind of conventional approaches sort of don't allow that, right? Whereas in this unique self-emergence process, it's a very alive aspect of the program. And it's also a part of the program that isn't tradition specific, right? It's not like we're only using a Christian or a Buddhist angle or a Hindu, but it's trans lineage. So it provides so much possibility for accessing this spiritual dimension, but the words and the language and the models can be tailored and applied to wherever people are at in terms of their lineage or even their secular. People that don't have a lineage still want to access this ultimate dimension. We have a doorway into that. And
Yeah.
so maybe we do, yeah.
That's usually how people come to us, David. People who are already doing some beautiful work in the world, working with people, coaching, therapy, spiritual directors even, who come from a lineage. And they want to, and so in that case, with spiritual directors, they already have an access to true self. And they come to our work because we're talking about unique self, and they are allured to this concept, this notion of unique self. They want to do something with their awakening. So there's all kinds of change agents who find their way to the unique self process. And usually they're moved by a desire to add a spiritual dimension to their work. And not just a spiritual in terms of true self, but a spiritual dimension in terms of unique self-realization. And so they're interested in discovering what that is for them, but also how do they transmit that in their work? How do they include that dimension in their work? And that's how they come to us. Because the unique self-emergence process, as you know, is really about that particular possibility of emergence for each human being. I like to say as a coach that emerging as your unique self in coaching is the topic of all topics, right? It's the topic that really cancels all the other topics. Emerging as your unique self.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a powerful integration of so many pathways in human flourishing and emergence. It's funny you mentioned spiritual direction because I've been in the corporate world working doing coaching for the last few years, and I felt like there was a yearning in my own deepest part of myself, my soul, for bringing in the spiritual dimension. And I made some attempts at first, and when I did some mindfulness training, and a few people liked it. I did stuff that I used language that at one point people were like, "Wait a minute, what is that?" Like, that's not corporate stuff. So anyway, I kept it kind of in a little bit of a box there. But I've also signed up for a program that incorporates spiritual direction, interestingly enough. And for people who don't know what that refers to, spiritual direction typically comes out of the Christian tradition, and it enables people. It's where a spiritual director actually helps the directee discern God's presence in their life, right? And the interesting thing about spiritual direction is it's ironically not really directional a lot of times. It's the spiritual director is more of a companion that sort of points out things and says, "Oh, that's interesting that you noticed that experience. Tell me more." And it sort of is in this sort of adirectional space of just the presence of God. But what the unique self-emergence process brings is an overall direction, like to the unfolding, that there is a direction towards discovering not just the presence of the ultimate in your life, but the way that the ultimate expresses uniquely, right, through all of us, and wants to give its gifts through us uniquely, that there's actually, the more that we can immerse ourselves in that presence, the more we can find our deepest gifts and our deepest desires that are actually needed in the world. So there is an actual direction to this process, right? And I just think that it's such a beautiful way that is, again, integrating kind of the secular world of direction, of like achievement, of kind of movement, and the spiritual direction world of just presence and kind of evoking the spirit in our lives. Actually integrates that, so where it's able to do both, is able to give people access to their deepest nature, their essential self, their true self, if you will, and be moving towards more of their unique expression.
Yeah. Often people come to me and tell me that they want to help people, either help people find their purpose, or they want themselves to be more clear about their life purpose. And unique self emergence really responds to that question, because your purpose, my purpose, is to be clear, to be more clear, and your purpose is to be David, and more, and to actualize the essence of David. And so the purpose becomes not something that's outside that we need to figure out and needs to be articulated, but the purpose becomes, and it takes a life of itself. It's embodying your essence. And that's really what the unique self-emergence is about. It's to learn how to recognize your essence, to learn how to express it, to learn how to give it its, to nourish it, to cultivate it. All this is, and this is the ultimate purpose. Again, it's the ultimate topic, it's the ultimate purpose, is to be more. There is more Claire to come, right? There is more David to come. There is more God to come through David, through Claire, through anyone, uniquely. And that's something that we, as we go through the process, we really can touch tangibly through the practices that we go through in the process. And then they become alive in you, and the process grow way beyond the process itself. They just keep growing as you engage them.
Yes, I love that you brought it back to the practices, because when I went through the program with you, or receiving this training from you, I was able to, I was equipped with a tool that I could recognize every time the ego comes in and tries to hijack my experience. So that's actually what happens with our process, is that anytime we experience a glimpse of our unique self, at some point the ego tries to come in and hijack it, or the false self comes in and sort of brings us into emotional spiral. And every time I experience that ego coming back into things, or the false self coming into things, I had a practice that I could bring compassion to that tendency, and bring compassion to that false self core belief of I don't belong, or whatever it was that was mine, I don't belong, or the egoic tendency to kind of avoid difficulty and wanting to have new novelty and change and multiple options. And I was able to bring compassion to the ego and the false self, and feel the clinging quality of the ego actually release and dissolve. And in a sense, it converted into my friend, and into the ego as an instrument for ultimately the unique self to come back online again. And so it's a continuous process that's still giving me a lot of gifts today. And I finished the program months ago, right, that I can always go back to. And so ultimately there becomes no split between the ego, the false self, the unique self. It's all kind of an internal symphony with the true self, or spirit, right?
So what you're saying here is important, because we are learning in the process, in the early stage of the process, we learn to recognize the ego, as you said, and the contractions of the ego, and to bring compassion, and to actually, through this particular practice that you're describing, we're learning to metabolize the contraction. We're literally metabolizing shadow materials, and through a very simple process, and so that it can leave space for our essence to come through. So this particular practice that you're mentioning is very important, and I'm still doing it. You know, it's a life practice, and it becomes a way of being. So it at some point, the practice merges into a particular muscle that you've developed, and it just shows up when you need it.
Mm. Yeah, and if we imagine, all the facilitators, healers, therapists out there who want to bring a spiritual dimension to their practice, having gone through the unique self-emergence process themselves, I'm just inviting everyone watching to imagine what it would be like if anytime a trigger comes up, you actually can recognize it, and you have a tool that will be like, oh, okay, I want to bring compassion to my own triggers and my own egoic tendencies, and then starting to distinguish between what's mine to work out, and then actually be more present for our clients and for the healing that's yours to do, and the therapy that's yours to do, and the coaching that's yours to do, to be much more present as your unique self, to then invite the client's own deeper essence to come through, because your egoic tendencies are not just sort of taking over, but it's actually just part of your ongoing practice. So I'm just sort of looking at that again.
There's more presence, there's more compassion for your client, because you've gone through the process, and you also are going through your process all the time. So there's compassion that's allowed, that comes more deeply. There's presence. There's also another important point is that, as you describe it, we're not bypassing anything. We're not bypassing the work. We're doing the work. This is not a spiritual program about learning practices that will allow you to feel better necessarily. We're just diving deep. There's the process is designed in a way that you go deep into the false self, deep into seeing who you're not, so that you can actually come out the other way, knowing that you're not this, that you are true self, that you are a unique expression of essence. But you do need to go down the you, as we say. It's a you process, right? It's that we go all the way down and we come out the other side. So it is a descent. There is a descent process that happens, and so we go deep into the shadows and come out the other side. And once we've done the process, the descent, and come out the other side, then we know we're like, Hecate, the goddess of the dark, with her light. She knows the way through the cavern, because she has a light. So we're like Hecate. Descend into the dark.
Yeah. And we're ultimately, what that allows us to do is allow us to participate in some of the greatest healing possible, which is to help other people not feel so separate from others. Like, some of the greatest pain in people's lives come from the feeling of being isolated and alone and separate from everything around them. And by engaging the spiritual dimension of the work that you just so beautifully described, and being able to go through the shadows and experience the field of love beneath that, we actually recognize that we're in the same field together, right? And our clients recognize that, and they can feel that pulsating love and compassion, and that healing connectedness. From there, the next greatest healing that is available is for every individual to know that they have a unique gift to give and be able to recognize that and give that. And that comes out of this field of love and field of intimacy, if you will.
Yes, totally. So there is this descent into one's own shadows, this realization that by tapping into our compassion, which is not just our own compassion, we're tapping into the field of compassion. By doing that, we are kind of entering that greater field of love, of which we're all part. And by merging into that love, we don't come out as merged and lost in that love, but we come out as our unique essence of that love, that unique essence. And so paradoxically, we merge into the contours of our separate self merges into that greater field of love and true self. And because of that merging, we become more ourselves. Or the contours of our unique self becomes more visible. So we become more ourselves, and at the same time, we don't feel so separate anymore. So it's a paradox. We become more ourselves and we're not separate. The separate self cannot grasp this.
Yeah, wow. And we can dance with that paradox. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I'm so excited to run another, unique self-emergence process with you and synergize in all the ways that we synergize and be able to, meet people where they're at and be guides and companions and coaches along their unique self-emergence. So it's an honor to be in this with you.
I'm super excited. And this is going to be the first time that we offer this process only online. So it's been designed so that it can be offered online. It used to be delivered in person. So this is, I'm just super excited to do this with you, David. Looking forward to it.